Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Alan Scott. Alan, how are you doing today?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad, and good morning to you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah. Well, now it's afternoon, right? It's about 1:30.
Over in the UK afternoon. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. I just had somebody actually. It's funny that you told me it was 1 p.m. because when I looked, for some reason it told me it was noon. So I'm glad you said that, because then I had somebody else that's really close to you, and I'm totally blanking on who it was. So I actually went and changed their time because I was like, oh, they're like, yeah, I'll meet you at that time. I was like, oh, but 8 a.m. standard time or Eastern time isn't their time. So I was so glad that I was able to fix that. So we'll start right in with that first question there, Alan. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Oh, blimey. It was a bit long. As some of your people might know, I'm actually dyslexic. So all through school, writing wasn't really on my radar at all, because I'm quite old, 50 odd. Way back in time, being dyslexic was you were thick, stupid, and thing.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually. But I loved reading. I loved reading fantasy books and sci-fi books, and it was really sort of, I'd call it a bit of midlife crisis. When I was about 40, I thought, I'm going to write my own. So I sat down one day and I went, okay, let's have a shot at this. And some of my favorite authors, like David Gemmell, Franz Lieber, they always had a more mature main character. And I thought, I'm going to write a book that is a more mature main character.
Yeah.
So I sat down and started to write. And it just flowed and it flowed. And that's how Echoes of the Storm came about, my very first book. And so that was basically my journey. I made a lot of mistakes, as you do when you start saying,
I know that
how
feeling.
this works, doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I also made some really good friends out of this, because, as you know, writing can be very solitary.
Yeah.
You know, you lock yourself in a room, you're there with your typewriter, pen, paper, or your laptop, you're thinking of these ideas and all going through your head. It can be quite a solitary thing. But there's also, but I don't think people also realize, there's that support mechanism around you. The people that edit it, people will give you honest feedback, people who do your covers, things like that. So I came around. I had these wonderful people I never met before starting to come into my world to help me develop my stories and put them out there. So that was, in a sort of a nutshell, that was really my story. A deep love of stories, especially fantasy and sci-fi, with a little bit of, because I'm a man, let's say, well, I used to love Sven Hassel, an author called Sven Hassel. He used to do World War II books.
Yeah.
When you're a 14-year-old boy, you love that sort of thing. That was a deep love of that. And I served 12 years in the military.
Oh, cool.
So I took all that experience as well with me, seeing the world, meeting different people. I did 2 tours of the Falklands. I've been in 3 years in Germany, that sort of thing.
Oh, wow.
So all that knowledge and experience, and seeing different people in different cultures, which I think is vitally important for anyone to see this. So when I sat down to write my own books, I wanted to draw on all of that experience and write it as a 40-year-old male. You know, I'm not a 30-year-old female. I'm not, a teenage going through teenage angst. I wanted to write the books from my point of view, from a man's point of view of slightly older. And that's what I've tried to stay true. And luckily, I've had a lot of people buy into that, and perhaps I'm moving in the back of people like the Twilight series and things like that, they've got into fantasy books as you older, and as you get older, you want to perhaps see yourself reflected in the books. As you get characters. So that's basically how my writing journey started. On a writing site that's now gone. I was the moderator for fantasy and horror. So that got me a wee bit more into that, and building and now I'm 53 now, so I've got 13 years of experience.
Oh, wow.
I don't call myself a professional. I'm an amateur. I still wish one day, you never know, I might be discovered. But my books have done not too bad. My audio books not too bad. And as long as I have the love of writing, I'll carry on doing it. And if I have 7 people read it, do you know what? Fabulous. That thing. So yeah, that's my journey. That's how I've started, and that's how I've got to where I am now.
Well, first of all, let's not forget, George R.R. Martin, was quite established, until Game of Thrones. He had been in it, I think, I believe 17 years, something crazy like that, until you know, he wrote Game of Thrones, you know, so your Game of Thrones, you know, still out there. So, but the other thing I love this is that, you know, you do make a really good point, and we've talked about this with several authors on here that, you know, a lot of people think that you have to write about you know, 18-year-old, you know, at the start of their life, you know, and it's like, but not everybody's 18, you know, like I'm 34, you know, like I want to read about somebody who's, you know, having some back problems, you know, and, you know, has to be careful of, you know, what they do, and, you know, not always these supermen, you know. It's like, you know, like one guy I know, like in a book, he was like 34, 40, and he jumps off this tall building, and I'm like, that would hurt, like, you know. And then he does this fight, and I'm like, there's no way, you know. And I think that's why people really like Joe Abercrombie too, you know, is he really has
Oh,
a
he's
mesh of,
brilliant.
you
Oh,
know, he does a great
yeah.
job of that, you know. And I've been trying to think of that too, you know, like, you know, I always think like, you know, how old is this character, you know. And you know, and then, you know, I have I was talking, you know, before we started, my first fantasy novel, like I'm have them where they start at 17, and then later on, you know, they're going to be like 30, and then, you know, towards the end, you know, they're going to be in their 40s, you know. And it really spans a lot of time. And I think it's good that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people forget, right, that, you know, when I was single, you know, before I met my wife, I was like, I was like 27, you're about to turn 28. I was like, I do not want to date any more, you know, women under 24 that don't have a master's degree, you know what I mean? And I just was like, I just, you know, I had been doing that for a while, and I was just like, they were at a different point in their life than I was, about to be 28, you know. And then professional, you know, I just wanted somebody that acted more professional. So I always tease her. She was 23 and 3/4 when I met her. So I said, yeah, you almost didn't make the cutoff. But, you know, you know, we talked about that though. We have a friend, you know, whose spouse is significantly younger, and he's like, oh man, like, you know, she's in a different spot, you know. And but it's true, right? Like if you're, you know, you're in a totally different spot, 30 and 40 compared to 20, you know. And I think that we forget that in writing. So I think you make a fabulous point there.
Yeah, and people also forget fantasy had a bad rep 20, 30 years ago. It did to have graphic novels and things like that. But nowadays it's become more mainstream, and people forget there's such a wide range of fantasy. You can do the elves and the dwarves and all that sort of thing, and Twilight and aim it at teenagers. Then you can have the darker side, and perhaps I would argue the more interesting grey characters. You know, it's not all black and white. You have the more interesting grey, and the more, and they reflect the problems of a more mature. And then you can even go to the other ends. So you've got the dark fantasy, you've got the high fantasy, you've got low fantasy. You've got, as you say, you've got the ones that is just switch off brain and enjoy what's on the page. You know, leaps off massive building, gets off, breaks a leg. 2 minutes later, he's running a mile, whatever it is. There's that wonderful mass, and each one is unique in itself, and you can enjoy it for what it is. There, as you know yourself, there's books you read and you go, I can relate to this and I enjoy it. There's other ones you go, I'm just going to switch my brain off and go with the story. Take me wherever you go in. Right?
We call it the Jason Statham effect, where you have, you know, in like the transporter where he flips the car over and the bomb gets knocked off by the bulldozer or the crane. Yeah, it's like it's gonna be fun, you know. But I agree. There's definitely two main types for me. And those are the types. Yeah.
And stories are there to entertain.
Yeah.
I've had some feedback in some of my books. I'm going, okay, that's fair enough. You can give me feedback. You've bought it. You're entitled to give you feedback. But this is a book to entertain.
Yeah.
You know, don't pick up these little bits here and there. It's not. There's no historical accuracy. It's a fantasy book in a fantasy setting. Right? And so if you didn't enjoy it, thank you for buying it. Great for leaving a review. It's a 2-star. That's fine. That's your right. And I think that's one thing with authors. I find I've talked to somebody, we need to have a bit of thick skin. We all criticize, and there are going to, I always say there's 20% of people will love our work, 20% of people will loathe our work, and 60% of people will be totally indifferent. and we sometimes go too much on those people that are negative, but we that's why I think writing, and I've said this before, you have to write for the joy of it.
Yeah.
If you write for the joy of it, people will pick up on that, and they will enjoy what you write, because there'll always be someone that's going to open up your brain and go, it's not for me. Yeah, that's fine. I've done it myself. I've read a book and gone, and some big name authors going, bored, and they're multi-millionaire big name authors. You know, but we have to have that thing. Anyway, I've digressed slightly, Daniel. So
No, no,
apologies for that.
I know. I think you make I love meandering because it always makes a good point. I think you make a good point there, is like, I saw a couple authors recently where it's their first book and they're like, and I get it, because I'm excited anytime, I get somebody downloading or views, and my wife, I said today, I was like, wow, I was excited about one was like, 4 views before 7 o'clock. So today was a great day, having 102 downloads on rss.com. It's pretty early in the day. But, it's like, I still, she's like, you feel the same if it's 1 or 2 before you go to work that you do as 102. And I get that, and I do understand, the ratings and things like that. But I feel like I've seen so many of my friends, writing coworkers where it's like, they get so devastated by a bad review. And I'm like, well, like there are certain reviews that like I just throw out. Like I'll never 1-star a book. If I 1-star a book, I consider that I did not pick the right book, or it wasn't for me. And if I slog through it, that is not, I like to finish all books that, at least at some point. It's just a personal matter of pride. But like, I might come back to it years later. There have been some where, oh man, there was just a book recently where I was like, oh, this is not for me. And then, 5 years later, oh, Wheel of Time was one. I picked up Wheel of Time as a kid, Terry Goodkind, Legend of the Seeker, and then I picked them up, 6-7 years later. Well, I had a different life experience then, the books, they hit me. My friend tried to get me to read Kevin Hearn's Iron Druid Chronicles, earlier in college. And I just don't think I was there yet. I was like, nah, it wasn't Kevin. It was just, I didn't even look at the book. I was like, it's urban fantasy. I don't read urban fantasy. Well, then he bought me one before I moved to Arizona. And then I moved to right where Kevin was writing the books, where he used to live in Tempe. And, I was walking by buildings and going to restaurants that the character was going to, like Rula Bula in Tempe. And I had the fish and chips. That's Atticus is like his main character's favorite food, and it was just, it hit me 10 years later totally differently, and it ended up being one of my favorite book series of all time. So, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, do those things. I just personally, I think 1-star reviews, I don't know. I wish it was like a 1 through 4 system, honestly, because I just think 1 out of 5 just doesn't do anything for you. And I don't know. I know. And I just see people too for, like one guy, for instance, the other day for his Amazon review, right? One of my friends, he posts and he goes, well, it's a fair review. And I'm like, it's not a fair review. In it, they put the book was falling apart. I said, you have nothing to do with Amazon doing that. I said, that should not be in your book review. And I've seen so many reviews where now I'm like, okay, it's like I tell my students, I'm like, if you have a teacher that has a skewed grading system, you can't get upset with the grading system, I think you take what you learn from it, but I do feel there's a lot wrong with Goodreads and Amazon's, review system. And I just personally think that if you make that your thing, so I want to bring it back to what you said about the joy of writing. I think you can't do it based off reviews. I think you really have to base it off of, people who are enjoying your work and, enjoying that's why I enjoy all my coworkers like yourself. Like, I enjoy being part of the community rather than, not that I won't be one of those people that looks at reviews, but I just already feel like I'm I'm making my skin thick because it's like, Brandon Sanderson has bad reviews, J.K. Rowling has bad reviews, and it's like, they don't care. They're sitting there, Brandon's got his own.
But yeah, because I follow Joe Crombie on Twitter. That is Dark Lord. Or
I love his bad review.
Yes, he always twitters up, doesn't he? Listen, he only does 1 or 2-star reviews.
Yeah.
And to me, it is fabulous because it proves to us independent authors that also big name authors can get bad reviews. And there's a difference between a critical review and a nasty vindictive review.
I agree.
And some people I got hammered on Goodreads. Oh my God. I got ripped to shreds on Goodreads on one of my books. And I thought, oh, come on. I mean, they were really, really nasty. And I thought, well, this is not, what is it? I don't normally read dark fantasy. And this book, I'm paraphrasing here, and this book reinforced the reason why I don't read it. Well, why did you start reading if that's not what you normally read? And then once they did not finish all the rest of it. And it's like, but it taught me a valuable lesson, brutal, but valuable lesson. If you're an author, make sure, because we just push our books out, but we don't target your audience.
Yeah.
And good, and I did one of these Goodreads, push your books out, and 100 people do it. I didn't target it right, and that was a hard lesson to learn. But as an independent author who has to do all his own PR stuff and all the rest of it, make sure you target the right audience, because if you target the wrong audience, you are looking to get ripped apart, because there's so many people. And I find Goodreads quite a brutal place. I got a lot of negative reviews on Goodreads and a lot of very positive reviews on Amazon.
That
And
seems
like
to be
the
the pattern. I don't know
pattern.
why. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because people think that authors, because your Amazon profile, is linked directly to your book. So I don't.
Yeah.
I think maybe people think that, oh, Goodreads, these authors don't see it, but it's like you do. So I don't get it.
There's a snobbery about it. I really do think there's a snobbery about Goodreads. I'm a professional book reviewer.
Yep.
Okay, no, you're not. Well, on Amazon, I like that.
Yep.
Or if they're good enough, they'll put it if you like it on Amazon. Though, of course, there's a lot of people, I've done it myself, don't leave reviews. And it's like, please leave a review. I'd rather have a 3-star than nothing. At least makes me up the thing.
Well, even the 2-star, even 2 stars help you.
If it's constructive feedback, yeah, I 100% agree.
Oh, I just mean with the algorithm, just the algorithm.
Oh,
so there's a,
all right.
Yeah, so there's there was an article that just went out recently. And then like Dirk Ashton and those guys and like Michael R. Fletcher, Jed Hearn, Robert J. Hayes were talking about it on Wizards, Warriors, and Wars. I guess now it was like back in like February, but Amazon released numbers and statistics, and those guys were talking about how like you actually shouldn't just have a bunch of your friends post 5-star reviews, because it messes up your algorithm. But honest 2, 3, and 4s, particularly 2s and 3s, if you have more foot traffic, actually help your book, because the ones that do better for their algorithm, at least this is how it was in the winter. Let's say that you had a bunch of 4 and 5-star reviews. They don't help you with the auto bots sometimes as much, because they want your product, if you're 2s and 3s, to sell. So sometimes they'll help you out with the algorithm at certain times, where then they're like, oh, Alan needs help because there's a bunch of 2s and 3s, whereas your 4s and 5s are generally selling better, right? So they end up, it's something with the Autobots or Autobots where then they go back and they just like reset a different way. It was very, very interesting. And I was like, oh, so that's why I was trying to tell people, like, it really doesn't matter. Like, you take your feedback and, people that you trust, and then you go and you make the next one better,
I also think when I'm choosing books myself, if I see 2 and 3 stars, they sort of ratify the 5-star, because I'm thinking, people are actually giving honest feedback on this book, rather having paying people to give reviews, having their friends giving reviews. I always like, I always get a bit nervous when I see like all 4s and 5s. It's like, okay, where are the 2s and 3s? Because not every, goes back to what I said, people, not everyone will like your book. So where are the 2s and 3s? So I always like to see a number of 2s and 3s go, perhaps this is our honest reviews up here. And it gives me that choice to whether or not I want to buy the book or whatever I'm buying.
I'm horrible, because people ask me all the time, because of this channel and stuff. They're like, do you blah, blah, blah? I'm like, I don't look at, I'll be honest. I'm a person that I'm a huge art fan. I was going to originally be an illustrator. Absolutely, I love art. So, the first thing I look at is your cover. If I like it, I'll pick up the blurb. If I read your blurb and I like it, and even sounds remotely interesting mixed with that cover, I'm like, I'm there. I don't look at reviews. I don't care. I have this one episode that I'm going to do recently this summer, and I'm really spending time to put it together, where I'm actually trying to get my friend Benjamin Blackmore from Literature and Lo-Fi to help me, because he brings up right here the book covers, and I don't know how to do that yet. So I want to do that, but like there are advertisements that I have seen where I'm like, these are amazing advertisements on Facebook. So I'm studying these people's advertisements, and I'm putting them all in a document. I'm going to blog about it. I'm going to do a huge thing. Well, some of these I go on and they're only like 60 reviews, but I'm like, and they may not be great, but their advertisement was amazing. Their book cover is incredible. Their blurb is great. And I'm like, that's really personally what I look for, because I've just kind of learned to, to see, the forest, the trees through the forest, so to speak. And I just feel that sometimes it's hard, right? Because you're looking at everything. And I feel like reviews sometimes do that, and I don't know, like there are also books where it's like maybe some of the writing isn't the best, but the characters and the ideas were great, and like you said, some people are very snobbish. So, it's like there might be something that I enjoy in there that, or a magic system, a magic item, maybe just the adventure, itself. So I just feel we're getting in the age of reviews where it's almost like Google, like the other day I tried to find something on YouTube. I had the title of the video and it took me like an hour to find it. I feel like there's too much now. And I kind of feel like with technology, like reviews are almost, I think, are bogging down still good books. And I think some people, because everybody reviews differently, right? And I think that, again, I think it's a skewed system. So I personally, as a reader, I just throw it out. I'm looking at some of your books and I'm like, oh yeah, Ed, that's a good read. It's like, I'm like, here we go, Amazon Kindle. And I didn't even look to, I looked for our interview, just to see for questions and things. That's the only time I look at reviews for anybody. So
well, I was very lucky to have Saskia do my covers.
they're
The
great.
one thing that I did land was when Saskia agreed to do my covers.
Yeah, they're fabulous.
And I agree with you about books, because if you ever look at Terry Pratchett's first books, Color of Magic and The Light Fantastic, I love Terry Pratchett, right? I think he was who wrote The Discworld is a masterpiece.
I agree.
His first two books weren't that great. When you get things to Guards or Witches Abroad, they are fantastic books. But his first two, they were good, don't get me wrong. They blow mine out of the water. I'm not saying any way, shape, or form.
I'm struggling. I've started books. I've started book 2-3 times, and I said I think I just need some time in the summer where I can just take 2 days and sit down. But yeah, I agree.
Reaper Man, Witches Abroad, it shows an author at the peak of his skills, and that's what, like yourself, I never judge the author by the first book, because that's where they're learning. If you like the characters and you like what they're doing, then read the second and third book.
Yeah.
Because and then decide whether or not actually they're not very good or not.
Yeah.
But if you, as you said, if you buy into those characters, and I do think characters are vitally important, but they have to be. You have to invest in the character. It can be the best story in the world, but if you can't connect with that character, you're not going to finish the book.
Yeah.
And sometimes, anyway, yes. So that's that. And covers, like I say, Saskia. I was very, very lucky to get Saskia.
Well, you said, book 2 or 3, a lot of people, they say, really, I was reading a study recently. I love reading about writing, and they say like most people don't hit the sophomore stage until book 4, like at least book 4. So that for me, I'll read the first 3 of somebody, and then I'll always get to book 4. If by book 4 I don't like it, I'm like, okay, I'll move on to somebody else and see if maybe book 5 eventually, catches my fancy. But yeah, I think it's interesting that, I just like people to know that way, they can give people a little bit of a break. I always tell people, I'm like, once I wrote a book, like someone said something, I go, have you written a book? I'm like, it's a lot harder than it seems. I said, then you got to write a second one. Then you got to write a third one. I'm like, give the person a break, like it's funny. All right. Now, if this would open, that'd be great. All right. So what genres do you currently write in, and why?
Okay. As I said, mainly dark fantasy. I've dabbled in sci-fi. I've got 2 sci-fi books.
Oh, okay.
The Y-Front Chronicles. Well, I'll tell you why they're called the Y-Front Chronicles in a minute or two. Y-Front Chronicles. I've done a little bit of poetry. I'm very bad at poetry. They went, nah. And I've done a semi-autobiography called The Rain Dancer. It's a novella, 73 pages, about being dyslexic in the modern world. So that's cool. So that's my genre. Like I say, dark fantasy, sci-fi, and like I say, a novella, 75 pages of being what it's like to be dyslexic in the modern world.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's what I'll do.
There was one author who, I can't believe it was about 4 years ago. I read like a fantasy story for them, and it was like, it's kind of like Rick Riordan did, like all like Percy's dyslexic because he, like he's a demigod, and it's like part of like the magic system. But there was another indie author years ago that I read who did the same
You,
thing, and it was cool.
you forget Agatha Christie was dyslexic.
Yeah, yeah,
Jules
yeah.
Verne was dyslexic. John Lennon, while he was not an author, he wrote songs, was dyslexic.
Yeah.
There are because people, this is what I came up against when I was young. Oh, you're dyslexic, you can't possibly write a story.
Mm.
And you believe that. And then as you get older, you go, and then you start going, oh, this author, Steve Jobs was dyslexic, Apple and all that. And he's only, and this is where all of a sudden, and it didn't hit me till I was my 40s, going, wait a minute, you're always told being dyslexic, you're a fool, you're an idiot, it's a disadvantage. And all of a sudden you still go, why, how come all these big name people, why is it a disadvantage if Agatha Christie wrote all these books, Jules Verne, etc., etc.? And then I read this book called The Dyslexic Advantage, and it just blew it all wide open. And that's why I wrote The Rain Dancer, because I wanted people to know what it was like. And I pushed it out. And actually, I worked for the council, and I gave it to all my managers, and I actually went up to the chief exec, because it was it's quite a hard hitting book. I'm very, very honest. I always change percentages. It's 60% real, 40% author's privilege of twisting some of the facts, right? And then I tell someone it's 70-30, and I've done talks at libraries about it, and everyone's going, I never knew that. The only thing is you're dyslexic, you can't spell.
Yeah.
There is so much more to that than it is as well, and especially as authors, I wanted to get out there that just because you're dyslexic does not mean you can't tell a story.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's all you are doing as an author. You're telling a story. And this is what I'm saying, this collection of people, because I wrote my first books. I got a few peer readers to do it. And then I self-published it. This is where I made all my mistakes. And I got this wonderful lady. She's a very private person. So I always call her Lisa from Texas. Lisa from Texas came up and said, "Oh, your books. I love your book. God, the mistakes." And she said, "I'll proofread it for you." I said, "Look, Lisa, I can't afford it." She said, "I'll do it because I love your stories."
Oh, that's cool.
I went, "Are you sure?" I said, "Lisa, I can't." She said, "Look, send me your stories," because she wanted to do something with English as a profession, but for whatever reasons, a very private, she couldn't do that. So she did this for me. And then she started to proofread all my stories. So I'd send them to her and she proofread them for me. And that's why I wrote, I don't know if you looked at my Amazon profile, there's a story called Tea in there. And I wrote tea for her to say thank you.
Oh, that's
It's got a
cool.
wonderful, Saskia did a wonderful cover. It's the teapot, and in the mist, you see two faces. Kind of like an Art Deco-ish cover. It's just called Tea. And the reason I wrote that for was one of the characters I was going to kill off. So you can't possibly kill him off. He's my favorite character. I went, oh God, I had to totally rechange the story. And so I brought her favorite character and I wrote this short story and published it. And then the forward is, this is to Lisa W from Texas, to say thank you very much for all our help. So I wrote that for her, put the acknowledgement for her, and Saskia, like I said, created this wonderful cover of the teapot, the steam, and the two faces in the dark watching each other. And what the story is about was one of the characters was a gay tailor in his 60s, and the other one's a 600-year-old werewolf who have a cup of tea. And people go, this is what my work's like. They go, what? But that's just the story. That's just the story. It's not what it's about. It's about loneliness. It's about hiding who you are from the world. And two people coming together once a year to be who they actually are as friends. So the gay tailor can just be himself. The werewolf can just stop having to put all these, and they can just sit and eat cake, have a cup of tea once a year and the coldest night of the year, and be themselves as friends. And then the werewolf goes off and there's always like, and all the tailor can do, because he's old, is wait for his friend to come back in a year's time. So I want to do social isolation. There's a lot of old people, I don't know so much in America, but here in the UK, you have like tower blocks, and they're 60, they've got no one to talk to. They're
Yeah.
I wanted to bring that social aspect, and this is why some of my stuff's mature, not so much in sex and violence, etc., but it does mature themes of loneliness, being who you are. How can you, and hiding who you are, and looking at something you can only do when you get a bit older and you can sit down and reflect on your life and people you've known, and things change. So that's how sort of so my stories develop, etc., and how I write and things come together regarding the genres we're talking about. Yeah, we're talking about genres. I'm off on a tangent again. I do apologize, Dan. I've got off on one again. But and that's how I wanted to write The Rain Dancer, as reflection of that, of myself in the real world. And trying to give, and I've had on Twitter, I've had quite a lot of people come back saying, thank you for writing this, because I didn't know how to say it, or I now understand a bit more, or I'm a dyslexic writer. You've given me the courage to actually go forward with
Oh, that's
something.
cool.
And all you need is a really good proofreader, because there's a lot of people perhaps are not the great, but if you have the imagination, you have the stories, you can write them. You just need someone to help you, bit of structure, proofreading, and you can produce really good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think
That's
a
how I
lot
got
of
Lisa. Sorry, please go on, Dan.
no, I
Please
was
go
just
on.
gonna say it's just funny that you mentioned, dyslexia, because I do think that people forget that Helen Keller also wrote 2 books. And I always tell my kids, they're like, I can't do this. I said, no offense, but I said, if Helen Keller could write 2 novels, and not learn how to speak, before age 12 or communicate with
Yeah.
people, I said, she started to learn letters, sign letters, around, 12 years old. I said, you guys already have, I said, first of all, you have something that she doesn't, I said, you can communicate, you can hear, you can see. I said, you are leaps and bounds ahead of her in a race. I said, so if she can write 2 books, I don't think some people realize, but I believe she was also taught some college courses too. I think that, like it's just barriers, right? And you're just talking about
Exactly.
barriers. And I just think that people, I hear that all the time. You're one of several, authors who has dyslexia, who's come on and said that, like, I didn't think I could do this, and then this hit me, or this person said this, or read this book, and I think you make a great point there. I mean, anybody can do this. ML Spencer, actually, I don't think a lot of people realize that with Dragon Mage, she actually didn't write anything. I mean, she was really struggling. So she had a really bad like from writing, I believe. And then she had an injury in her right hand. So if I remember right from her podcast, was Wizards, Warriors, and Words Guys. But she was talking about how she, just records everything on the way to school. She's an English teacher. So, so she just, reads the transcript and she just fixes the transcript, and then an editor fixes that. So I do agree with you. I think there's, so many different ways that, you can, figure it out. I mean, if you really want to, if you got good stories to tell good stories, I mean.
Exactly. And if slightly reverse it, I know a lot of people who are fantastic at English and they write the most rubbish and most boring stories.
Yeah.
They're, yes, you need
totally true.
You need both. There you go, bored, sorry. Oh, but I've got this. I'm using the Oxford comma. Yeah, whatever. That sort of thing.
Nobody cares.
Good for you. Yeah. Is your story good? Are your characters, can you relate to your characters? That's the important thing. That's the passion you should be writing with, that people can relate to, and writing things, everything else can be tweaked. And it takes a vision of, and this is where you hope sometimes have that leap of faith. If someone reads that, who is in the publishing world, who is there going, do you know what? This is a rough diamond.
Yeah.
We have the skills and abilities to polish this, but you've got the knowledge. You have these wonderful stories in your head that you can articulate and tell, and these characters people can buy into. And it's just something that we were talking earlier about your new book, when you're saying, oh, this group, you've got the group of characters in your head, you're molding them, you're shaping them, you're getting plot lines put in, like we all do, going, oh yeah, that could go there, and then we can move forward with that. Some people can't do that.
Yeah.
Writers can.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what your ability or disability is. If you can do that, then there's always someone that can help you. And that comes back to what I was saying earlier. Yes, when you write, it's lonely because you lock yourself, but you have to have that support mechanism around you to help you move forward.
Yeah. Well, it's like speaking of Kevin Hearn, like his Iron Druid Chronicles, his the magic system is like where the druids, they feel and see threads between different beings and nature and things. So they like they switch their vision and then they see the magic spectrum and they can see the
Oh,
threads. It's really cool. And I feel like that's how writing is, like, and that's interesting, that he wrote a book like that, because I feel like that's how writers are, like writers have a different sight, they can literally, you see threads and you literally see the whole world and how we interact and all these things and world building, whatever plot. And like in it, they see different types of magic in different colors. And I feel that's how writers are, like you see
yes.
character threads here. Maybe it's green, plots here, maybe it's red, world building's purple, whatever, theme is blue, whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like when I read it I was writing, a bunch of books and stuff at that time when I read the first one, and I was just like, oh my God, this is what it feels like to be a writer, and I'm on, one of my kids the other day, he's like, you get like a superpower, like I tell them stories all the time and, and whatever. And, I try to make things interesting, in terms of teaching history. Sometimes it's not, and I think it's one of my kids who gave me a good comment. He's like, you see the threads of like people interacting, and I was like, well, I do write, I said, that's the thing that, is the most interesting to me. But yeah, it's interesting. So you did have T2 as well then, right? So is that just another?
Oh, right. So what I did was, with my books, I wrote Echoes of a Storm. And I was just going to write one book. That was it, one book, index. And all of a sudden, the second book, I started thinking, what would happen? So then came Signs of the Storm. And then I thought, how the blooming heck am I supposed to advertise these books? So I wrote a whole lot of short stories. But each short story linked in, and that's how Tales for a Storm-Filled Night. I got all the short stories I wrote that I pushed out for free on Amazon. I put them into one document, which was Stories for a Storm-Filled Night. But I wrote T, and then I had to, it wasn't the story, it finished. And all my books, they finish. You have completion. But I then thought, what happened next? And this was when I was writing the second trilogy. And I wanted to finish it off. So I wrote T2, because that was the bridge, that helped bridge between the end of the first trilogy and the start of the second trilogy. And I needed a little bit of bridge. So T2 sort of helped that bridge. Stories of Salvation and Damnation was also the bridge book between the two. And then I wrote A Dark and Hungry Storm, which was the end of my Storm series. And then one of my main characters, Solomon Pace, who is a baddie, he's not particular, but the women loved him. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, we really? And I go, he's not. Oh, I don't care. He's not nice. We like him. So, all right, okay. So I thought, well, so I started to write shorts. I love doing short stories that are interlinked. So each one links up, but so you can have this. You don't have to worry about too much of follow-on stories. You can have little snippets. It's like episodes, and I always think of it like an episodes of a TV series. They all link together, but you can do each one separately.
Yeah.
And I did that. And again, Saskia did me a wonderful cover of Solomon. And when I did my audiobooks, there's another American, well, Saskia's German, another American, Carly Schultens, did my audiobooks, which is really weird. I'll come back to Carly in a minute. But so, yeah, that's how that all came about. That I wrote all these little stories, but I wanted them to be, if you didn't read the story, you could read the trilogy and it wouldn't impact it. But if you read the short stories, it gave you more information on the other ones. So it's a bit like an onion. You can peel back layers. There's a story in Tales for a Storm-Filled Night, and that reflects specifically against Echoes of a Storm. There's a charity set up, an orphanage charity, and I do a throwaway line. I love doing this. A throwaway line. Oh, Kathleen was thinking about the murder that happened 3 years ago before she entered the building. A throwaway line. I just thought that might be quite interesting to pick up. 2 years later, when I was writing the book of short stories, I went, that throwaway line. So I built on it because I wanted to write a murder mystery. I realised I cannot write a murder mystery. I went, oh, sugar, I can't write them. So I had to twist them. What am I going to write? So I filled out and I did what I wanted to do within a I can't do murder mysteries. I have no skill in that area at all. But I built on that. So I have a lot of little throwaway lines in my books. that I then write a story that backs onto it. And so
Oh,
when you
that's
read the
cool.
short story, that's what they meant. But if you read the trilogy, that's fine. You don't need to, or if you just read the short stories, you go, oh, that's fine. You don't need to know the main story. But I like the way that, and all my stories set in the Storm series world are all interlinked. They're either bridging stories. So what I wanted was a reader who picked up the first book to have an experience and flow through the books, and they change and they adapt and they grow. I'm not so much character based, though there are one or two characters flow. I'm more the story evolves and grows. So characters may drop out, but new ones drop in. And you have this epic flow through to the end where maybe 2 or 3 generations have gone through, but you can see how it started at the beginning. So if you wanted to pick that story up again and reread it in a year or two time, you go, this is the beginning. This is how it started. I remember that. I remember this. But going back to Solomon, yeah, Solomon was my villain, but everyone seemed to love him, and he's quite dark. But I didn't want to be the classic twizzle mustache villain, so he's a little bit broken. You can understand why he does things, and you can understand why he does it. You might disagree how he does it, but you can understand his motives behind it. So she did that wonderful cover of him, Blue, holding his walking stick. And the first the Deadly Tap of a Cane, I wrote when I was this moderator for this website, and World Press picked it up. And World Press is an international organization. It's on my Amazon thing. They picked it up and they teach people to read
Oh, that's cool.
in Africa and various other places. What they do is they get a whole lot of stories, they put them on Kindles and things like that, and they send them off. And what they wanted, Shakespeare's lovely, but in the modern day world, there's no
Oh,
place for
yeah.
Shakespeare, right? Right? Because no
Especially if
one
you're
talks
trying to
about
learn English.
exactly. So what
A
they
whole
wanted was
different
books.
vernacular.
Oh, exactly. So what they wanted was short story books that people that spoke in proper English, in modern English, people could learn to read off of.
Oh,
And as
that's
a
cool.
dyslexic, I went, oh, bloody. But what we had to do was literally sign our life away. We had to sign the story. We get no money for it, no nothing. But I thought, do you know what? I don't care. The fact that this was good 8 years ago, so that's this company wants my story, and it's going to go out, and people are going to read it, and they're never going to read another one of my books. These are people in Africa and other places learning to read, but I don't care about that. The fact that I've done this, that's enough for me. That's a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
tick. And the fact it's going out, so like I said, I put it on my profile on Amazon. If you ever look at my profile, there's a thing World Reader on there linked to it. So yeah, so that I wrote, that's how the very first story of that came around. And then I just kept on adding stories to it. And then I got that book. And then I also did, but I later collated it, but Saskia did this wonderful, wonderful cover.
They're all
The
really
Midnight
great.
Dance.
Honestly, they're all really
Have you seen the
great.
cover for the Midnight? But I'll come to, but since we're on Saskia, I hope you don't mind. I'm jumping all over the
Oh,
place,
no,
Dan,
no,
here. I
no,
do
no, no.
apologize. Saskia, right? I did my first stories. I went to my brother. Said, "Oh, my covers were awful. Literally, there was a black thing in red writing, and that was." My brother went and says, "Oh," he says, "I know this lass. I'm on Facebook with her. She's in Germany. She does covers." I said, "Oh, send her my email." I said, "All right, here." So I emailed. He sent me this email address. I emailed her. My brother said I can contact you. I'd like to do my book. I got, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, it's a werewolf, and it's this girl. Her English is, my German, though I lived over there for 3 years, is not that great, and my written German is non-existent. Her English is a wee bit better than mine." And I just gave this literally 2 sentences, and she came back with this cover, the Echoes of the Storm. And I went, "Oh my God, that is stunning." And I said, oh, so I paid her for it, obviously, paid her for the cover, but she gave me a really good rate for it as well. And I wrote my second one. I said, "So let's get." She said, "Yeah, yeah." And I said, "How?" And my brother said, "Oh, she had kids." And I said, "How's the kids?" She went, "I don't have kids." But she said, "I don't know who your brother is." There were 2 Saskia Snells, believe it or not, in Germany. Both were illustrators. One had 3 kids, and the Saskia Snell my brother gave me has done record company covers, has done magazine covers. If you ever go to her website, she's done Adidas, she's done Mercedes, she's done album covers, she's done. I went, "Bloody hell, Saskia." She's done some superb work. And she said, she'd come back, and I phoned her up. She went, "Alan, I like this is near my downtime doing your covers. I like the fact that you just give me emotions, and I draw the emotions. And that's how I miss a wrong email
It's
to
crazy.
someone and this is and then I became quite good friends with Saskia. And the fact that I just said, I just gave her 2 lines. And she'd go, like, tea was 2 people having tea. That was it. And she came back with a cover. And she loved doing it because when she works for big clients, she has to be very specific and very nitpicky. I just give her some emotion and she draws it. And I think there has only been one cover that I've ever gone back to her and said, can you change it? And that was Stories for a Storm-Filled Night. That one, you'll see the guy in the front is Nathaniel, who's my main character, and behind him in shadows is Solomon. But I said he had a cane, so she put a top hat on. I said, please take, he doesn't have a top hat. So that was the only, and she took the top hat off. And that is the only cover I've ever changed in all the ones she's ever done for me. All the rest, they're literally, she just said, I went, brilliant, fantastic. And she's never, ever done me wrong with any of my covers. And there's a couple up there that I've had to take down because I'm reworking the second series. I took down The Midnight Man, The Kingdom Falls.
Oh, okay.
And like I say, I'd also had a book up there, like I say, the Moonlight Dance, which was 3 short stories for Solomon Pace, which I then combined with Tales of Solomon Pace. But the cover she did for that, my wife nicked for our wedding invites. It was 2 people dancing at midnight in a forest, but she made it so like the earth, it was like the world. It was superb. And like I say, my wife just said, that's our wedding invite. Okay,
That's awesome.
And that became that.
Smart man. Smart man. Yes,
yeah, you just go, yes, dear.
No,
but that's
good.
how I got my covers. And she's done every single one of my covers.
Well, Echoes of a Storm was, I mean, that's got to be, I mean, like I said, I wanted to be an illustrator. I used to teach graphic design. I mean, that one in particular, I mean, they all look fabulous. I like that one the most. And T2 too is just with the teacups and having it be a clock. If you're online, you got to go and check out, Alan's Amazon. So it'll be the second link there. That's what I usually do. And make sure you take a look right now and check them out, because the T2 cover is absolutely brilliant. And Echoes of a Storm, that was the first one I think I saw. I was like, holy moly, like then immediately made me read the blurb.
If you notice the birds coming out, there's like flights of birds. She's echoed through that. So Signs of the Storm's echoed through that. Dark and Hungry Storm. And,
I see that now.
Stories for a Storm-Filled Night. So that links the covers together, those birds coming out. And I don't think, I haven't got it in front of me, I don't think it's in Tales of Solomon Pace. I think that's just the trees that link it with the rest.
I was gonna say the Tales of Salvation and Damnation, that's a really cool cover too.
Now that one's got a wee bit of that caused a little bit of problems for her, because I said what I'd like was a werewolf, a vampire, and the church. She couldn't get the church in there.
Oh yeah.
But she got my werewolf and got my vampire. And
that looks great.
Where they're sort of just looking at you, which ties in quite nicely with one of the stories, because that's where I'm mainly write. I'm mainly a werewolf, but not the traditional werewolf sense. All my fantasy stuff, you won't get dwarfs, you're not going to get elves, that sort of thing. It is more werewolves, undead, but not the traditional lycanthropy werewolf. It's their spirits. I took a lot from Celtic spirits entering someone's body and them transferring that way. And so you have the werewolves, which I call Dever, D-E-V-V-E-R, are the werewolves. You've got the Merver, which is the water. You've got the Chosen, which are the air. And you've oh God, that's terrible. I can't remember. Twiver is the fire spirits. So they enter someone's, they enter someone's body and they take over the body, and that's where they can then, they're in human form, and then they let the spirit take over them and they transfer into the werewolf form or what the other form is. And that's what I wanted to use. And my main character, Nathaniel, is 30-40, but he looks younger because of the regenerative power of having the spirit within him. and he's not had an easy life at all, and he's now the bodyguard to the to the Queen. And what I
Oh,
wanted
that's
that, and
cool.
I touched on a lot of those sort of things. What I wanted to, without too many spoilers, because I've sort of, you can see at the start. What I had this scene where the Queen, her husband's died, her enemies are around her, and she's sitting on the throne. This guy's come and said, basically, marry me, force marry me, and I will then look after, because if you don't, all your enemies will come. And she's sitting on her throne going, do you see me as a mere woman? And all of a sudden this growl comes from behind her chair, and everyone's sort of looking around, and she goes, run. He goes, why? And all of a sudden Nathaniel changes into the werewolf and sort of next time says, have you met my bodyguard?
That's
Run.
cool.
And then that actually came from a nightclub I was in once when I was very young, 18, 19. This gorgeous looking girl was sitting, and this guy was chatting her up, and she was having none of it. And then a boyfriend came. He was 6'6" in all directions. And literally he just said to him, have you met my boyfriend? And these guys were like, oh, sugar. Or worse, that general effect. Because they were quite needy. And this big, massive guy literally loomed over. I'll never forget it. She just sat there with her drink, have you met my boyfriend?
That's awesome.
And I'd sort of nick that. I thought, that'd be fantastic in this.
Yeah, yeah.
To show
That's
the power
cool.
she controlled the beast, therefore controlled everything else. So that's the sort of fantasy setting I've sort of built around, and I build and build and build on that as the books, and you learn a bit more about the world, and you learn a bit more about the world. And it's and Echoes of the Storm is, people don't get it. It's not what people think. There's a very, called that very specifically, why it's called Echoes of a Storm. But you only get that about 3/4 through the book, and all of a sudden it sort of twists. I like twisting things around. Not like sudden going left field. You go, that doesn't make any sense. But oh, that's why that's that. That's why that. And hopefully and some of the nice reviews I've got, people say it was a page turner, because I got to the end of the chapter and they went, oh, God, read the next one. I do like ending on a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, it's that.
Yeah, keep them going.
You know, to keep going. So yeah, that was the world I built with all those books and the pictures that came in. And then I wanted to become an audiobook. And of course, it's a male book. And of course, me being Scottish, there's a lot of Scottish elements through it. And so I went onto Audible and I was looking for someone to voice it. And I got, some really awful people. I thought, no, I got one who is just deadpan, no emotion at all in the
Oh,
voice.
yeah, yeah.
You're killing it. Thank you very much for auditioning, but no. And I never thought about, and then Carly came on and she just read it and I went, it works. Bloody hell. And excuse my French, and I was going, I never tried for a woman to read it. But I've got a lot of female characters, and her voice she does for Solomon Pace is perfect. It's almost like Transylvanian-like,
Oh, that's cool.
mid-European, and she's got this wonderful voice, and she's got she had fun. She said she actually had fun playing Solomon, because it's quite sort of like, everyone's like slightly boring, but because and she's just done this. If I ever had to say anybody, if you want to read one of my books, it's Tales of Solomon Pace. If you like that, you'll like my work. And if you get that, you get the audio book for about $5, $10, whatever it is, off of Amazon. And just listen to Carly do Tales of Solomon Pace. That is such that if you like those two things, you'll like the rest of my work. If you hate it, you'll hate the rest of my work. It really is as simple as that. My sci-fi one is the most political I've written, the Y-Front Chronicles. That was when I was getting as a moderator for this website that's finished. And I was, as I said, I was moderating sci-fi and horror. So I had to put something up I thought, I'll have to put something up every week because I'm the moderator. I'll do a diary. Never do a diary in first person. Oh God, no! What was I thinking? Diary first person, because it's almost impossible to put whole plot things and tell people. But I started doing this, and I don't know why. I really don't know why. One of the things, he's in space on his spacecraft. He decides he's got to go and buy a new undergarments. Right? I don't know where it came from. I put this in. And the feedback I got from women was unbelievable. Oh, that's brilliant. We love that. What pairs he bought next? I'm going, All right, okay. So I just went with it. But it is but me being ex-forces, the way at the time is how people treat ex-military.
Oh, that's cool.
Um, I wanted, again, my books try and reflect without shoving it down people's throats. People leave the military. I don't know what it's like in the US, but some they did a report, something like 70% of homeless people are ex-military. And
I
having
think
done
it's
12 years,
65 right now in the United States. It's pretty up
so
there.
I was in the RAF, Royal Air Force. I was a caterer. I was a catering accountant in the Royal Air Force from 89 to 2000. But 12 years of my life was living on a camp, speaking military speak. Everything I knew was military. You come out of that, and that, of course, Scottish, but I ended up in England. Oh, you don't, your family's no longer there. Your life is in a different country, or maybe in a different state if in America. And all of a sudden, nobody cares about what you've done. You go to a job and you can't talk to them because you're used to talking to military speak. Military people, these are other people, and they're going, what the hell are you talking about? And unless you have a family or something to bring you back, it took me about 3 years to adjust. But some people, especially in the army, can't adjust. They just like, and they go, oh, look at those people drinking. You don't understand. They've seen things that you've never seen.
Yeah.
I have never fired my rifle in anger, and I always thank whatever small gods they are. I never had to do that. But I've met people, etc., etc., and that there's such a huge culture shock of coming out, and people go, "Oh yeah," and that's why I wanted to write this sort of, and it is my most political book about what it's like coming out the armed forces and the mental anguish that goes through that. The only thing you're good at, you can't use in society,
Yeah, yeah.
which is, and this guy was like, he's a killer. You can't do it. So that's why I wrote, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to write this. And I got a really good review from, I think she was Swedish or Norwegian. I haven't had many reviews because not many people pick it up. Um, Even when I put it on for free, not many people pick it up. I don't know. I don't know if they, perhaps the title's wrong. Perhaps it's one of these titles people go, nah. But I don't care. There was a reason why it was called the Wifefront Chronicles. And then the next book's the Wifefront Standoff. But again, Saskia did two really good covers for me. It's written in diary format. Never write in diary format. It's a nightmare, especially in first person. Don't do it, but I'm glad I did it. And it's quite easy because each one's a day. I like 4 paragraphs a day, and it is written like a diary. But the points I drive home are very deliberate about the way we treat our military when they come out of the military.
Yeah.
And something a bit dear to my heart, which is so reflected in The Rain Dancer, when I remiss about, and I talk about homeless people, why people are homeless.
Mm.
And especially where I live now, there's people saying ex-forces. Sometimes they lie, so you have a wee chat to them. Forces always know forces. You always know your
Yeah.
service number.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
always know service speaker
Yep.
thing. And I always make sure I give them something. But what is something? Giving them a fiver, £5 over here in the UK, £5, but you can't give to everybody. And what's £5? You can give them £100, but what, you just have, it's a token thing, but it's something I pick up in The Rain Dancer as well. Homelessness, and various other social aspects, which if you ever read the feedback from the Rain Dancer, a lot of it is, this book made me think, which went, thank you. That's the whole point. You might disagree with me, but that was the whole point, to make you think. And I think sometimes as a writer, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. We're there to entertain, to tell a story. That's what we do when you write fantasy and the rest, etc. But occasionally, I think we're allowed to write a specific thing when we want to make a statement about something we see. And that's very much what the Wifefront Chronicles are, and The Rain Dancer is. They're my 2 statement pieces on society. But hopefully I haven't rammed it down people's throat, and there's still 2 good stories. But it gives you that range. And I would never, what I do in the Storm series, I would never do in those 2 books. The Storm series is the things I write is a dad trying to look after his family. That's a standard story wherever you go. That's not politically or anything else like that. So anyway, yes, I forgot what question we're on. I was rambling again. I apologize, Dad.
Oh, it's all
I'm
right.
so
We hit pretty much all of them.
I'll be hit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know that about, your Y Front Chronicles. So that's really cool. I put you down for because like I was saying with my historical urban fantasy, my guys are gonna get out of the military, have to run. So I'll definitely be talking about those because I definitely want, people to like I said, forces is a big one, in terms of audiences for that, so I definitely want to get those types of feelings right. So I definitely got you down in my notes for setting that, particularly for book 2 and 3 in that, because they're definitely going to be out of the military by then. Yeah, I just was curious, in terms of, excuse me, your Storm series, how many books do you plan in the Storm series?
Right. Originally, I planned one. So what I've done is Echoes of a Storm, Signs of a Storm, A Dark and Hungry Storm was the trilogy, with Tales for a Storm-Filled Night, Tales of Solomon Pace as the short stories that link in with that. Then it was the bridging book, which Tales of Salvation and Damnation. I've written A Kingdom Falls, and I've written the other one. So I've got one more book to write, and that will be the Storm series finished. Like I say, I've currently pulled A Kingdom Falls and the Midnight Man. I wasn't getting many sales, and I got a couple other people to beta read them. The problem is, I didn't know if I went too dark. I didn't know if I went a certain direction with those two, and two of my beta readers went, love it. One went, oh, I like your other stuff, but this stuff, no. So I don't know where to go with it. So currently, like I say, I'm sitting there trying to think, what do I do with this? Do I go back and try and soften it slightly and then write the third book? The third book's in my head. I know how it's going to finish. Or do I just stick to my guns and go, this is it, and then write the third book? So that's where I am just now. It's that terrible thing. Do I just go for? But they never got great sales, you see. So I don't know. Do they need more work? But I need to try and find someone I can trust to go, right, read this. If you know my work, read this and tell me where I've gone wrong. Or is it just the fact that, as many indie authors will tell you, it's really, really difficult to get your book out there. It is ultra difficult. There are so many books out there just now. It's a flooded market. People expect everything to be free. If it's not free, they're not interested. I was looking at some of my sales 10 years ago. I put this on Twitter as well. My books were downloading 600-800 a month 10 years ago. Now I'm lucky if I get 5-6. It's a whole different world now. It's no longer that fresh, wonderful world it was 10 years ago. And it's such a difficult place to work in there. So you never quite know your stories. Is it just because there's so much out there? And as you see, the logarithms, whatever you want to call them, if you're not linked into that, then your book can, you see it yourself. You're 800,000th in the list, and nobody's going to see it except by accident. Luckily, apparently, I'm the very first Green Lantern. I've been told that many times. Apparently, Alan Scott was the very first Green Lantern.
The Silver Age.
Which I'm very proud of. So occasionally I might get Alan Scott instead of the Green Lantern. My stuff might pop up. But yes, that's where I am just now. And my last book I did was the Rain Dancer, because that was during lockdown, and that was a very story I wanted to get out there.
Yeah, I think you make just like a good point, like that's why I, like I was saying, like I would love if anybody from Athon Books is listening, for my historical urban fantasy, I would love to get that one, traditionally published, or I guess you could say, or or indie published or whatever, through a company, and then not like just being able to write that one and then taking some of those, hopefully sales or profits or whatever. My friends was saying this the other day, because this is why in August last year I decided to do this podcast, is partly is to learn, and partly it's to start to, I was like, oh, I'm going to get people to buy my books, and then it very quickly became like I just enjoy talking to other people about theirs. And like, I guess in the rare circumstance where next year where I'm done, I would be like, hey, anybody mind, this or that. I try not to ask a lot of people. Like I just feel like I'm a very firm believer, if you help people, they'll just naturally help you.
Yes.
So, and I'm just like, I don't know, I enjoy talking to somebody like yourself, and then, reading your books on, Kindle. It's like the director's cut, and I learn a lot more from the process rather than just reading a book, and as being a writer, it's like I want to learn, particularly, with your type of, style. I like that type of style for my historical urban fantasy in particular. Your covers too, I was like, oh, that's really cool. So it helps, me to do research and stuff. But I do think you make a good point that, it really is. I talk about this podcast all the time. I just got 3 posters made. I'm like 3 more on my next check. I'll probably do 3. I'm going to start getting a hold of people around the country and start shipping them out. And all they have to do is just put them up at a comic shop, a bookstore. I have my 4 QR codes, one's for my website, one's for RSS, one's for YouTube, one's for Spotify. So you can just go right up. Oh, that guy looks cool. So I feel like my friend, $160, Caleb Gosens, if anybody has a second, go check out his website. Go, check out his Instagram. He's absolutely amazing. $160 for my, my color logo, and I think it looks incredible. And to get him and myself out there a little bit more. But it's my friend the other day, he was like, thought about the QR codes. I said, that's brilliant, and it leads you right to what we want you to go to. So I my friend was like talking about it, and he's like, Jed Hurd said the same thing, that them starting their podcast helped him, he feels, with especially us, Siege of Trebleland, his new interactive game. Like people knew him from it, so they wanted to review a little bit more. So I think, my friend said the other day, we're about to go to this book sale here in just a few, and he was like, yeah, he's like, my friend's written 3 books. He's like, we were talking about this last Saturday. He's like, you're different. I've been a salesman almost my entire life. I'm a teacher, I'm a coach. I talk to people all the time. So it's easy for me, to, once I have my product, I'll be like, oh, hey, blah, 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 and my goal is to get, my first book, like 200 sales within the first year. Cause most books, on average teeter out, in their lifetime for that. So, doing different things, it's like, I'm always trying to, that's why I interview, people try and be creative, or, do TikTok, book talk's really hard though. You really gotta hit it at the right time. I mean, I do it all the time, and I average out like 300 views and maybe 2 likes, and it's like, it feels like you're just screaming into the void. Like it really, really does. And you have to, unfortunately, being an indie author, even a traditionally published author, Scott Drakeford said the same thing with Tor. He's like, you would think, that, not that Tor doesn't do a great job, but, he's not Brandon or whoever, yet. But, it's like, he's like, yeah, I, have to do the podcast. I have to do this. And, I think even hybrid authors, for instance, Kevin J. Anderson, very famous for Star Wars and other series, he said the same thing for the last 6-7 years on different podcasts, including his own, and he's like, those big royalties and advance checks that he used to get, don't exist anymore, and it's like, it's really hard to be an author. Like, and it goes back to, just to kind of end us here a little bit on the main topic, is from the thing that you said originally, right? Is it really comes from, you have to want to write, you want to have that love. Because if you're going into it for the money, that's not the thing. You got to go into it for the stories, and having people read your stories and enjoy them, and affect them in some way.
Exactly. And I also find, especially on Twitter, which is my main thing, you'll never sell a book on Twitter.
It's so hard. Yeah.
But people lie a lot on Twitter. I mean, I always say I've got 100% success rate going with traditional publishing. Everyone's rejected me. I've got 100% rejection rate. and I don't think that's going to change much longer. In fact, now I've more or less given up with traditional route because I get rejected. And people lie. They say, "Oh yeah, I've sent out, and I've got 5 people fighting over my book." And you go there, and you go, "Okay, I can believe one of you, but not 2, 3, 400 of you."
Yeah,
My
yeah.
very first meeting. So if you are a author, big or looking into this, don't believe everything
That's
out there,
true.
because people do lie a lot. And also, I nearly fell into it as well. People say, "Oh yeah, send us £5,000 and we'll do this for your book, and we'll do that for your book."
Mm.
Nah, there are so many scams out there
Yeah, I
as
almost got
well that are
scammed too.
willing
Yep.
to take your money. And it was only because my wife at the time went, "I'll just check this for you." Went, "No, have you seen this?" The bit, at least I was about to do the check, was more or less about paying the post. So yeah, you have to be so careful out there as well, not to get scammed
Yep.
and not to believe everything you read. And that's why it's also good with what you're doing and other people, is these communities where you can talk about it,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
about things that affect us authors. And even like myself, I've been doing this 13 odd years. I always say I'm an international average selling author. It's kind of thing. But if a new person listens and says, "Oh, there are scams, don't believe that," and gives them a wee bit of hope, you never know. They could write a book and be a million selling author
Yeah,
just
yeah,
because they
yeah.
listened to your podcast and had a
Yeah.
little bit of advice. And you know what? That'd be fabulous.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be a fabulous thing to have.
Well, like I said, I went to, well, I don't think I said this to you, but, I met Kevin Hearn. Well, there were indie authors there, like Brandon Sanderson, like everybody went to meet Kevin Hearn. Brandon Sanderson had just, done his like 4th Wheel of Time book with Jordan stuff. He had just put out Way of Kings. Memory of Light had not come out yet. Way of Kings had just came out. Patrick Rothfuss and The Name of the Wind had just came out. So when I went, I had no idea who they were, and I just went and took their books. This is like 2 weeks. Not even, I think. And Brian McCollum was there with his first Gunpowder Mage book. There were, I'm totally blanking, but there were, Michael J. Sullivan was there. He had just written, he was on book 4 for like the Age Empires or whatever the first trilogy was, and he was great. But like Anna Smith Spark was there. She was only on book 2. This was like almost 7-8 years ago. And I saw people right when they were first starting, and now to see them, it's like, it's crazy, like you just never know. So people always like, "Oh, if you don't mind interviewing me," I'm like, hey, you could be the next George R.R. Martin. And not that I want anything from you, but I would just like to be the person that gave you an opportunity to help get you there. Because that to me would just feel really good. If somebody became the next, Brandon Sanderson or whatever, I don't even care, or the next Will White or something like that, and if we can help you get there, we can help you get there. But I always laugh because everybody's like, do you mind? I'm like, no. I'm like, come on, I'm like, my wife doesn't want to talk about books all day. So, that's why I'm going to hang with my buddy, because we're about to go as a book sale here in just a minute and, do the same thing. And, it's fun, but I think you have to have fun with it. Otherwise it's going to be a drag. So,
yes.
But speaking of which, so do you have any news, updates, projects, anything like that you obviously have the 3 books that you're kind of, thinking, maybe.
Yeah. Read you again. That's about it at this moment in time.
That's a lot to think
really,
about, though.
It is really busy at work and the private life as well. This is the other thing, you need time to set aside to do it. But what I will do is I'll time it, because this is going out on the 7th, isn't it?
June 7th. Yeah, correct.
June 7th. What I'll time is I'll put Echoes of the Storm on Amazon Kindle for free for 5 days from the 7th of June.
Oh,
so
cool.
If anyone hears this, they can go to and pick it up if they fancy a wee read of it. So I'll put that up there for free on the day this comes out. So if anyone wants to delve into it, they can pick it up for free.
Oh, that's cool. I'm looking forward today downloading the first 3 today, actually. So I'm pretty excited about that. Can't wait to get into
that. Fingers crossed, one, fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Tales of Solomon Pace, my friend. That's the one. I highly recommend. Author's recommendation. That's the one.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's a great recommendation. Well, Alan, I really want to thank you for coming on. I just, I love when people, approach me or, I get referrals. It makes my life so much easier than having to, again, scream out in the void and find people to interview. So if you have anybody, like you had a couple of people before we start recording, make sure you refer them to me and, send them my way, and I'll make sure I interview them. And if you do, have the 3 books, any point recently, in the summer or the fall where, you think, oh, I got it, and you want to come back on and we help you promote those, please let me know. And I'd love to help you in any way or form. So you let me know and we'll schedule a time to get together. So.
Brilliant, Dan. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Been a great hour and a bit. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alan. Well, I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I will be emailing you shortly to make sure you got all the links and everything like that. And like I said, I look forward to downloading that first one and getting to it very quickly. So.
Okay, mate. Thank you very much.
Yep. Have a good one, Alan. I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Cheers.
Bye.